The slap cracked through Mabel's diner like a rifle shot against the winter hush. Evelyn Brooks, a 69-year-old widow with silver hair and gentle hazel eyes, collapsed onto the cold tile, her small bag of groceries scattering across the floor like broken fragments of a quiet life. Travis Cole, the bully who had long treated Snowbridge as his personal kingdom, stood over her with a smug grin, his tattooed arms crossed as his two leather-jacketed thugs laughed on cue. "Stay out of my business, old woman," Travis sneered, loud enough for every trembling diner to hear. 20 customers, 3 waitresses, even the cook behind the window, all frozen in place, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. No one inside knew that help was already walking toward the door. Not a sheriff, not a local hero, but a weary Navy SEAL passing through town, and the German shepherd at his side. If this moment surprises you as much as it surprised Snowbridge, share this story, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. You never know when an unlikely hero might be standing just outside the door. May God bless everyone watching today. The winter blow in Snowbridge. A pale winter morning pressed over the small mountain town of Snowbridge. Mabel's Diner, a narrow roadside building with frosted windows and a dented neon sign, was one of the few places where warmth clung to the air. Inside, the worn leather booths carried the smell of coffee, maple syrup, and the faint metallic note of melting snow. Evelyn Brooks stepped through the door with the careful gait of a woman who had learned to move despite aching joints and a heart grown fragile with age. She was nearly 70, small and thin, with silver hair pinned neatly into a bun that revealed the soft lines of a face once bright with laughter. Years of Colorado cold had left her cheeks pale, but her eyes carried a gentle steadiness. She wore a wool coat that had faded at the seams and a pair of knitted gloves she had made herself during the lonely evenings after her husband passed. In her hands she held a paper bag of cheap groceries. She intended to drink 1 cup of hot coffee, let her bones thaw, then walk back to the little wooden house she and her husband had once repaired together, board by board. At a back booth sat Travis Cole, the kind of man who filled a room with noise even before speaking. He was in his mid-40s, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face carved in blunt angles and a jawline buried beneath a week of reddish stubble. His eyes were small, sharp, and always searching for someone weaker. His leather jacket strained over arms grown thick from years of hauling engines at his tow yard, though most people whispered that his real work was intimidation. Travis laughed too loudly, always at someone else's expense, and the town had learned to step aside or pay up. Rumor said a broken marriage and a violent father had taught him early that power only mattered when someone else feared you. Snowbridge had feared him for years. 2 of his cronies flanked him, young men with narrow shoulders and nervous eyes, the kind who followed trouble because they had nothing else to follow. They snickered whenever Travis did, shadows echoing a storm. Evelyn saw him. Her stomach tightened, but she drew a slow breath and straightened her spine. She had spent a lifetime trying to be kind first, firm second, and silent never. Her husband had always said that courage did not come from strength, but from choosing decency even when it cost something. Today, it would cost something. She approached his booth, her paper bag rustling against her coat. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice thin yet steady, "I need you to stop sending people to my home. I'm not selling my property, and I want the vandalism to end." The diners, truckers, travelers, and locals fell quiet. Forks hovered midair. Someone's breath caught audibly. Travis looked up from his phone with a slow, cruel grin. "Well now," he said, leaning back so his jacket creaked, "if it isn't Snowbridge's little holdout." Evelyn ignored the laughter of his men. Her hands trembled, but she pressed them together so tightly the shaking would not show. "My home has memories I don't intend to lose. I'm asking for respect." "Respect?" Travis repeated, his lip curling. "Lady, I own that street. I own this town. You don't get to tell me what to do." Her heart pounded against her ribs, but she managed, "You have no right to frighten me." The smile vanished from his face. Without warning, Travis rose from the booth. His height swallowed the space between them. A few customers shifted as if to speak, then froze. Everyone in Snowbridge knew the sheriff answered Travis's calls faster than anyone else's. Evelyn opened her mouth to continue, but she never finished the sentence. Travis's hand lashed out. The slap cracked across her cheek like a branch breaking in winter wind. The sound bounced off every wall of the diner, stopping breaths, stopping courage, stopping even the hum of the heater. pain bloomed across Evelyn's face, sharp and hot. The world tilted. Her grocery bag split, and apples rolled across the slush-streaked tiles. She reached for the counter, but her fingers slipped. For a moment she felt not 70 but 7, small, frightened, and wishing someone would take her hand. No one moved. Her vision blurred into snowy static. Her knees thinned beneath her. This, she thought faintly, is how fear wins. It asks you to fall quietly. From the corner booth, Travis smirked as if he had just confirmed his place as king of Snowbridge. Evelyn's breath came small and rapid, her thoughts scattered. Shame stung deeper than the slap. Her late husband's voice rose in memory, steady, warm, the voice of a man who had worked hard, loved deeply, and never used his strength to hurt anyone. "I'm sorry," she whispered inside herself, as if apologizing for failing to stand tall. Her knees buckled, and then a sound drifted through the diner's fogged windows, a single bark, low, steady, and deliberate. Outside, through the haze of swirling snow, a large German shepherd stood in the parking lot. The dog's coat, rich black over warm tan, gleamed even in the muted winter light. A black harness wrapped his broad chest, and his ears were pinned forward with soldier-sharp focus, as though he sensed danger no one else had the heart to face. Some customers leaned toward the glass, uncertain, whispering, but Evelyn only heard the bark, deep and sure, a strange promise in the cold air. No one inside the diner knew yet whether the man walking beside that dog, a man built with quiet strength and a past carved by battles far from Snowbridge, would reach the door in time. But the winter morning had shifted. Something had answered. The veteran and the warning bark snow swirled across the parking lot like pale smoke, as Noah Carter adjusted the navy winter coat stretched across his broad shoulders. He stood with a measured stillness, the kind learned only by men who had survived chaos. At 40, Noah carried quiet strength in the sharp planes of his face, the high cheekbones, the squared jaw trimmed with a few days of dark stubble, the faint white scar running from his temple to his ear, a reminder of a night in another country when a door had exploded inward. His left leg bore the ghost of an old wound, causing a slight hitch in his stance, though he never allowed it to slow him. Beside him, Ranger, his 5-year-old German shepherd, stood alert. The dog's black and tan coat gleamed beneath the winter light, thick and disciplined as his training. His amber eyes scanned every movement with soldierly precision. The black harness strapped across his chest bore the bold letters, "Service dog, do not pet." Ranger rarely vocalized, relying instead on subtle shifts of weight and quiet rumblings from deep in his chest. But when the slap cracked from inside Mabel's diner, Ranger stiffened as if struck himself. His ears snapped forward, and a low growl rolled through him before he issued a short, decisive bark, the kind that meant danger now. Noah knew that sound. He opened the diner door. A gust of winter air pushed in behind him, scattering snowflakes across the linoleum. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the hanging lights seemed to flicker, as if the room had inhaled. Noah surveyed the scene with a tactical sweep trained into him long ago. An elderly woman, small, silver-haired, fragile, struggled to rise among the groceries scattered across the floor. Her cheek burned bright red where a hand had struck her. Her posture wavered as though she was clinging to her last thread of strength. Between her and the nearest booth loomed Travis Cole, a hulking man with inked forearms, a thick neck, and a smirk spread lazily across his rough features. Travis radiated the kind of confidence found in men who believed no consequence could reach them. Ranger stepped forward, placing his body in front of the woman, Evelyn Brooks, with the steady precision of a guardian trained to protect without hesitation. Noah's voice cut through the silence, low and unmistakably calm. "What did you just do to her?" Travis scoffed, amused. "And who are you supposed to be? Some hero wandering in from the cold?" He moved closer, expecting Noah to flinch. Instead, Noah remained perfectly still, the same way he used to stand when assessing a threat through a rifle scope, unmoved, unreadable, unshakable. That steadiness irritated Travis. He lunged forward to shove Noah aside. What happened next unfolded too fast for most to follow. Noah shifted his weight onto his good leg, angled his shoulder, and trapped Travis's arm in a controlled pivot. With a firm twist and leverage drawn from years of combat training, he guided the larger man downward. Travis hit the table edge with a crash that sent silverware clattering. Gasps rose around the diner. Phones lifted. People too afraid to intervene, but emboldened enough now to record what might become proof. Ranger held his ground, teeth barely bared, blocking the two younger men who accompanied Travis. They froze, unsure whether the dog or the veteran was more dangerous. For a moment, tension throbbed beneath the warm lights. Evelyn clutched Ranger's harness with trembling fingers, her breath tight, heart pounding with a fear she seldom allowed herself to feel. Then the diner door opened once more. A tall man entered, Sheriff Walter Briggs, Snowbridge's law enforcement chief for nearly 15 years. He was in his early 50s, with thinning blonde hair combed too carefully, a round face marked by stress lines, and a paunch that strained against his uniform. His pale blue eyes flicked quickly between Travis and Noah, but he masked his first reaction beneath a forced authority. Briggs had long traded integrity for convenience. Some said it began after his wife left him. Others whispered his gambling debts had pushed him into Travis's pocket. Either way, the sheriff had perfected the art of siding with the man who could make his problems disappear. "What's happening here?" Briggs demanded, though his voice trembled ever so slightly. Travis pointed at Noah, wheezing as he regained his balance. "This guy attacked me. He barged in and went crazy." Noah didn't move except to keep Ranger steady. "That's not what happened," he said quietly. Briggs ignored him, stepping closer to Travis with the familiarity of an old arrangement. "Mr. Cole," he said, "are you hurt?" Evelyn found her voice, thin but sharp enough to carry. "He struck me," she said. "This man," she gestured weakly to Noah, "helped me." Briggs turned to her with a tight-lipped smile that never reached his eyes. "Ma'am, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Mr. Cole is a respected businessman." Noah's jaw tightened. The scent of injustice was one he recognized well. It smelled like smoke and silence and doors closing where they should have opened. "Sheriff," Noah said, maintaining an even tone, "I saw enough to know she wasn't the aggressor." Briggs stepped into Noah's space as if peering over a cliff. "Son, you're not from around here. Don't make trouble where we don't need it." Ranger growled, a deep, resonant warning that vibrated through the floor. The sheriff flinched, and in that fragile pause, the truth of the situation settled over the diner like a fresh layer of snow. This was not just a scuffle, not just an insult. It was the first crack in a system built on fear. Noah sensed it. Evelyn sensed it. Even the customers, still silent, sensed it. But the moment held without resolution. Because at that instant, as Sheriff Briggs straightened and Travis's grin slowly returned, the chapter of what came next had not yet been written. Everything remained suspended. Danger, justice, fear, hope. Only Ranger stood firm, eyes locked on the man who had struck an old woman, waiting for Noah's next command. Snow-covered truths, the storms that rolled into Snowbridge over the next several days arrived without mercy, smearing the town into shades of gray and white. Snow fell in relentless drifts, clinging to rooftops, swallowing sidewalks, and muffling every sound. It was the kind of weather that made secrets harder to hold, because silence seemed louder in winter. Inside Mabel's diner, life resumed, but never returned to what it had been. The slap, the veteran, the dog. Those images tangled themselves into every whispered conversation and every cup of coffee poured. At the center of it all was Lily Parker, the young waitress whose quick thinking had changed the direction of a whole town. Lily was 23, slim and long-limbed, with a cascade of copper hair often tied back in a loose ponytail. Her skin was pale from working long shifts, and her hazel eyes carried a softness that made people trust her easily. She had grown up in Snowbridge, raised by her grandmother after her parents' divorce left her drifting. For much of her life, she'd been told to avoid trouble, keep her head down, never provoke the people who had real power. But something in her shifted the morning Travis struck Evelyn Brooks. Fear cracked open, and courage seeped through. Her recorded video now raced across the internet. Thousands of views, then tens of thousands. People from far larger places than Snowbridge had begun asking questions, and those questions spread quickly. Noah Carter watched all this unfold with the cautious eye of someone who understood how a single spark could turn into a wildfire. He had rented a room above the old hardware store, small, drafty, but close enough to reach Evelyn's house in minutes. Every morning he walked the snowy streets at her side, Ranger trotting proudly between them. Ranger had taken to guarding the widow as though it were the most important mission of his life. When Evelyn walked, Ranger matched her pace. When she paused to greet a neighbor, he sat at her feet like a statue. When a car approached too quickly, his ears went up and his body shifted into a protective stance. The townspeople noticed. The tension around Evelyn softened. People waved again, and Noah, quiet, deliberate Noah, found himself drawn into something larger than his brief plan to pass through Snowbridge on his way home. He had spent years believing he needed distance from people, distance from memories, distance from anything that might stir old wounds. But watching Evelyn reclaim her life, thread by thread, stirred a part of him he hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, the video had reached the desks of state investigators. Files once stamped closed were pulled from cabinets. Old complaints resurfaced. Property owners claiming Travis had threatened them, shopkeepers reporting mysterious break-ins, drivers who swore their cars had been towed for no reason at all. And sitting in the middle of every allegation was Sheriff Walter Briggs, his name circling each report like a dark watermark. Snowbridge buzzed in a way it hadn't in years. Neighbors whispered beneath frosted eaves. People handed Noah envelopes containing notes from those too frightened to come forward publicly. Evelyn, though shaken, insisted on giving her statement to the appropriate authorities. Her voice trembled, but her resolve did not. She had lived too long to hide now. But hope is fragile, especially in a town ruled by fear. Travis Cole did not take humiliation lightly. One evening, as the snowstorm thinned into flurries of ice, Evelyn insisted on delivering a casserole to a neighbor recovering from the flu. Noah accompanied her without hesitation, Ranger padding through the powdery snow. Twilight stretched long across the frozen horizon, turning the river into a sheet of dull silver. They were halfway home when the growl of an engine shattered the quiet. A pickup truck surged out from behind a stand of pines, tires spinning over hard ice. Its headlights cut harsh white beams across the river path, swallowing their shadows and throwing them against the snowbank. Noah's breath fogged sharply. Ranger bristled and lowered his stance. Inside the truck, two men leaned forward, young, jittery, their faces half lit by the dashboard glow. They were not the confident bullies who followed Travis around town. Tonight they looked wild, like cornered animals told to bite or be replaced. "Move!" one shouted, sticking his head out the window. The truck lurched sideways, skidding toward the narrow river edge. Evelyn stepped back instinctively, and her foot landed on a patch of sheer ice. Noah lunged, catching her elbow just as she slipped. The riverbank fell away only inches beyond where she slid, the ice darkening where the water churned beneath it. Ranger leapt in front of them, barking with a power that echoed through the winter air. The truck swerved again, too fast for the conditions. Its back fishtailed, throwing a spray of icy pellets into the air. The driver tried to correct, but panic made his movements jerky, desperate. "Stay behind me," Noah shouted, positioning himself between Evelyn and the oncoming threat. His injured leg throbbed beneath him, but he gritted through it. He had faced far worse danger than a skidding truck, but never with someone this vulnerable behind him. Ranger stood ready, muscles coiled, breath steaming in fierce bursts. And then, red and blue lights split the darkness. A patrol SUV slid onto the path, snow flying from its tires. This was not Sheriff Briggs's vehicle. It bore the emblem of the state police, an agency far removed from Snowbridge's corruption. The truck screeched to a halt, the two men inside freezing like guilty children. The state trooper who stepped out was a broad-shouldered woman in her late 30s, short black hair tucked under her cap, sharp features hardened by long nights of highway patrol. Her nameplate read, Trooper Marisa Dane. "Don't move," Trooper Dane commanded, one hand near her holster. Her voice was steady, crisp, and unmistakably in control. The two men raised their hands. Noah exhaled, slow, controlled, as Evelyn gripped Ranger's harness, trying to steady her breath. The danger had passed, but the storm behind it had only begun. The town awakens beneath the thaw. The first thaw of the season crept into Snowbridge like a shy visitor, softening snowbanks and revealing the earth beneath them in hesitant patches. Icicles clung to rooftops, dripping steadily, as though the town itself had begun to breathe again after years spent holding its lungs tight. In this shifting quiet, people walked differently, less hunched, less afraid. The investigation into Travis Cole and Sheriff Briggs unraveled with startling speed once the state police took over. Files buried in dusty cabinets were reopened. Complaints once dismissed as misunderstandings resurfaced with the weight of new testimonies. Travis had spent years shaping Snowbridge into a place where fear bowed to him, and now that fear was turning into fuel for the truth. Evelyn Brooks found herself at the center of it all. She sat in her living room on a cold afternoon, her fingers wrapped around a mug of mint tea. Though she still trembled at the memory of the slap, her voice had grown stronger. The investigators, two officials dressed in thick coats and somber expressions, listened as she recounted every incident she had endured: the broken fence, the threatening notes, the nights she'd heard footsteps outside her window but convinced herself she was imagining things. One of the investigators, Sarah Whitford, took notes with patient precision. Sarah was in her mid-30s, tall and reed-thin, with chestnut brown hair pulled into a low bun. Her complexion was pale from long hours spent indoors reviewing cases, and her gray eyes held a perceptive calm that came from years of learning how to separate lies from truth. She was known among colleagues for her persistence. Some said she had once exposed a corruption ring involving a city contractor who threatened her family. Since then, she carried herself with deliberate restraint, never too warm, never too distant. Yet with Evelyn, she softened. There was something about the widow's trembling sincerity that disarmed her usual defenses. On the couch beside Evelyn sat Noah Carter, his posture straight but relaxed, one hand resting lightly on his knee. He had become a silent pillar for the widow, speaking only when asked, never stepping into the spotlight. Grief, courage, guilt, and purpose warred quietly inside him, the old battlefield still echoing through his bones. On the floor lay Ranger, stretched across the rug like a sentry at rest. His coat gleamed beneath the fireplace light, his ears twitching every time a car passed outside. Every so often he rose to nuzzle Evelyn's leg, checking on her the way a seasoned guardian checked a perimeter. The investigators remarked on his discipline, and Evelyn chuckled softly before telling them he also had a habit of stealing sausages when she wasn't looking. The small joke broke the tension in the room. Snowbridge was changing, not through grand gestures or violent confrontations, but through small shifts. Neighbors stepping out of his house to wave again. A shopkeeper deciding to speak up. A school teacher leaving an anonymous statement at the police station. Courage rippled across the town like thawing ice cracking under sunlight. The grocery store owner, Mr. Douglas, an older man with square glasses and a dusty green sweater, came forward first. He confessed that Travis had threatened to sabotage his deliveries if he didn't overcharge certain customers. Days later, a bus driver with graying hair and a stern jawline gave his account of witnessing suspicious vehicle tows near the river. A timid elementary school teacher named Miss Shelton, with curly brown hair and faint freckles, admitted she'd been afraid to report the vandalism of her classroom door 2 years prior. Now she felt she finally could. And each time someone spoke up, the fear that once lay heavy over the town shrank a little more. Meanwhile, Noah found a kind of unexpected healing among the people he was helping. He repaired broken fences with a steadiness that surprised even him. He replaced shattered porch lights, remembering the nights overseas when darkness meant danger. He reinforced window frames, patched roofs, and rewired a faulty lamp for the old veteran who lived 3 houses down from Evelyn. The townspeople began opening up to him, telling small stories, offering muffins or hot soup, slipping notes of gratitude into his jacket pocket. Noah accepted their thanks with humility, though inside he felt undeserving. He was no stranger to being called a hero, but he never believed the word belonged to him. Heroes, he thought, didn't lie awake remembering the faces they failed to save. Ranger, of course, enjoyed his own popularity. Children waved when he passed, and adults marveled at how gently he nudged Evelyn out of icy patches or stood guard at her porch steps. Still, he had one mischievous flaw. Whenever Evelyn stepped away from her kitchen counter, a sausage or two mysteriously vanished. Noah pretended not to notice. Ranger, after all, had earned a few small indulgences. Snowbridge spoke differently now. Where whispers of intimidation once wound through alleyways, now there were shared stories, exchanged courage, and cautious optimism. And finally, the cracks in Travis's empire burst open. Multiple charges were filed. Witnesses poured in. Sheriff Briggs was stripped of his badge and temporarily held pending formal investigation. For the first time in years, justice felt like something real, not a distant rumor. Evelyn watched all this unfold from her porch, wrapped in a blue shawl. The thawing snow mirrored her own heart, a slow, tentative warming after a long freeze. She glanced at Noah, raking broken branches in her yard, Ranger patrolling behind him like a furry shadow. Her life had been small and quiet before all this. But now, she realized, it was part of something larger. Snowbridge was waking up, and so was she. The spring of forgiveness. Spring arrived in Snowbridge not with a burst of color, but with a slow surrender. Snow retreated from the sidewalks in thin ribbons, grass pushed timidly through the thawing soil, and the river finally laughed again as its icy shell cracked open. For the first time in many seasons, the town felt like a place capable of renewal rather than survival. Travis Cole's sentencing had marked the end of one era and the hesitant beginning of another. His confiscated properties, once symbols of intimidation, were parceled back into the community he had suffocated for years. Some families received backyards they had lost. Others received compensation for homes damaged beyond repair. Even Evelyn Brooks found a small envelope waiting for her, funds designated for roof repairs, porch renovations, and the return of a quiet dignity stolen the moment Travis lifted his hand against her. On a crisp morning in late March, Evelyn watered the pansies she had replanted beside her new porch railing. The flowers were simple, cheerful, and patient, qualities she once believed belonged only to people, not seasons. She wore a soft blue cardigan and jeans that hung a little loose on her slender frame. Her silver hair was pinned in a loose twist, and though her movements were slower than before winter, her smile had begun to return in small, genuine flashes. Ranger lay stretched across the porch, chin resting between his paws, tail sweeping lazily whenever he sensed her nearby. He was 6 now, broad, muscular, with a coat that caught the sunlight in shades of gold and ink. Children from the block often tiptoed up to hug him when they thought no one was watching. Ranger tolerated it with patient dignity, though his harness still read "Do Not Pet" in bold white letters. Noah often joked that the dog followed rules only when he personally agreed with them. Noah Carter, meanwhile, had become something of a fixture in Snowbridge, though he carried the role with quiet reluctance. He now worked closely with the new town administration to establish a community safety program, part self-defense workshop, part service dog training initiative. He rarely spoke of his military years, but his posture and his habits revealed the remnants of discipline. Early morning walks, the way he scanned a room before sitting down, the way he listened more than he spoke. Standing beside Noah at many town meetings was Deputy Hannah Lowell, a recently hired officer in her late 20s. Hannah was short and athletic, with a warm bronze complexion, almond-shaped eyes, and dark curls always pulled into a practical knot. She had transferred from a larger county after witnessing a corruption scandal that reminded her too much of Snowbridge's history. Her temperament was steady, her sense of justice uncompromising, and she had quickly developed respect for Noah's calm leadership, even if she teased him about being scary in a friendly way. On a mild afternoon in early April, Evelyn received a letter from the Department of Corrections informing her that Travis Cole had requested a mediated reconciliation meeting. She read the letter twice before setting it carefully on the table. Her breath trembled as she considered her response. Forgiveness had never frightened her, but confronting the man who hurt her required courage she wasn't sure she still possessed. When the day arrived, she wore a simple gray sweater and a necklace her husband had given her years ago, a tiny silver locket she always touched when searching for strength. Noah accompanied her to the community center, standing back to give her space. Ranger settled at her side, alert but calm. Travis entered the room slowly. He looked nothing like the man who once swaggered through Mabel's diner. Prison had carved new lines into his face, replacing arrogance with a strange, weary humility. His once muscular frame had thinned, and his hair, previously kept in a slicked-back style, now grew unevenly around his temples. His brown eyes, once sharp with mockery, now flickered with something fragile, shame, perhaps, or the slow dawning of regret. "I never thought you'd agree to see me," he said, voice hoarse. Evelyn clasped her hands in her lap. "I didn't come for closure," she replied softly. "I came because people deserve the chance to change." Travis swallowed hard. "I hurt you. I hurt this whole town. I turned fear into a currency. I can't take any of it back, but I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." For a long moment, Evelyn said nothing. Her mind drifted to her late husband, the man who believed forgiveness was not a surrender, but a form of strength. She imagined what he might say now, and warmth gathered in her chest. "I forgive you," she whispered, "but forgiveness does not erase responsibility. You still have work to do." Travis nodded. Tears slipped down his cheeks, catching on the stubble he hadn't bothered to shave evenly. It was the first time Evelyn had ever seen him look small. Weeks passed. Spring unfolded across the town, painting over memories of the harsh winter bit by bit. Noah's program grew quickly. Seniors learned to use walking canes as defensive tools. Women practiced situational awareness. Volunteer trainers arrived to assist with service dog sessions, many inspired by Ranger's devotion. Ranger became Snowbridge's unofficial mascot. People joked he needed his own badge. Noah pretended to refuse, until the mayor surprised them with a ceremonial tag shaped like a tiny gold paw. But Evelyn believed the truest sign of Snowbridge's healing revealed itself in the little things. A neighbor's wave, the smell of bread from the bakery that had once been vandalized, and the laughter of children playing where she had once been struck. One late afternoon, as winter's final chill brushed the air, Noah sat beside Ranger on her porch steps. Evelyn joined them with a cup of hot tea, steam curling around her face. The street was quiet except for distant children's voices and the soft tapping of melting water dripping from the roof. "Noah," she said gently, "if you and Ranger hadn't been there that day, I might have fallen, and no one would have dared to help." He smiled faintly, rubbing Ranger's thick fur. "I think you would have stood up eventually. Ranger and I just helped you stand up faster." Evelyn looked toward the old road where her world had once split open. The cold wind carried a single, deep bark from Ranger, steady, warm, protective. Just as she thought, didn't always shout. Sometimes it arrived on four paws. Sometimes the greatest miracles do not arrive wrapped in thunder or light. Sometimes they walk beside us quietly on a winter road in a small forgotten town. Sometimes they come in the shape of a weary veteran who chooses compassion over silence. And sometimes they come on four paws, with a steady bark that breaks the darkness just when we need it most. In Snowbridge, justice did not fall from the sky. It grew from courage, from kindness, from a widow who refused to surrender her hope, and from a man and his loyal dog who stepped forward at the exact moment God placed them there. Life is filled with days when we feel alone, unseen, unheard. But stories like this remind us that God's hand often moves through ordinary people. Neighbors, strangers, even a passing soldier and a faithful German shepherd. His quiet miracles appear in the gentle strength to stand up, the wisdom to forgive, and the grace to rise again. If this story touched your heart, let it be a small reminder that we are never truly abandoned. Where there is fear, He sends courage. Where there is injustice, He sends protectors. And where there is brokenness, He sends the chance to heal. May the Lord bless everyone watching today. May He watch over your homes, your families, your quiet battles, and the paths you walk each morning. If you believe kindness can save a life, if you believe God still works miracles through ordinary people, then please share this story. Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel so more hearts can feel this message. And may God's peace follow you wherever you go, just as it followed a widow, a soldier, and a brave dog through the snow that day. Amen.